Okay, so just a quick one on X stitching or double punching, as I've also heard it called. And basically this technique is where you punch the two sides separately that you want to stitch. So like this one, both sides are punched, these will get glued together and then they'll stitch. And the reason it's called X stitch is because you punch both sides with the same iron, so when you put them together the stitches form an X rather than both of the holes being in line. And the thing with this technique is you need to have your stitch holes perfectly where they need to be. So you need to plan out where your stitch holes are going to be so that they fit perfectly, so you can punch them without having to adjust anything, so that you know they'll line up. So this is my pattern piece for the two back pieces here, and as you can see they have the stitch holes in there. So this piece was designed to perfectly fit that length of stitch, so then when I go to punch the holes they line up perfectly and I don't have to move anything about. So the both sides are exactly the same. And then obviously here I've already punched my holes, and then you'd put your glue on the back, which I've already done on these. And then the trick is sticking them together but making sure all your stitch holes line up from one side to the other. So the way that I do that is I take needles and I put them at any point where there's a corner. I put them at any point where there's the end of a run. So that would be here. And then say on a longer run, like this could be much longer, you'd want to put a few in the middle to make sure that everything, like the middle of the stitch line, doesn't waver a bit. So just put them two in there to say, if it was, yeah, they're a bit overkill for the size here, but if it was longer then yeah, you definitely want to put ones in the middle. And then you basically line these up with the corresponding stitch on the other side. So that's the two ends. So you end up with this, and then you just want to slowly pull them together and get them close, so that everything's close, so that it doesn't distort when you push it together. And then you want to try and make sure that your needles are as straight as possible, nothing's way off, and then you just want to slowly bring the two pieces together, put a bit of pressure on the glued surfaces. So that's now glued. Pull my needles out. And that's basically it. Like, that should ensure that my stitch holes are close enough to be able to stitch through. Stitching is a little bit different. You don't cast. So if it was towards me like this, this side, the top of the hole is pointing towards me, but this side, the bottom of the hole is pointing towards me because they're opposite. So I'd put my needle in this side at the bottom of the hole, and which is furthest away from me, but then it'd come out on this side in the bottom of the hole, which is closest to me, and then the thread on this side would go in the top of the hole, which is furthest away from me, and come out at the top of the hole, which is closest to me. So one's always on the bottom, one's always on the top, and then when you're pulling your threads tight, you want to pull them both towards you. So this side, which is on the bottom, you'd want to pull down but towards you, and this side which is on the top, you'd want to pull up but towards you again. So usually where you pull the thread away from you, this one you want to pull both of the threads towards you to seat them properly, and then stitch like that, just without casting, because if you cast it will mess it up. And that's basically it. A lot of people seem to be really worried about this technique, and are worried that they're going to mess it up, or that the stitch holes aren't going to align. It all comes down to planning. All comes down to planning when you're doing your templates. If you make it so that you know exactly where every stitch is going to lie, you're not having to move stuff about to make your stitches fit because you haven't planned it fully, then you know that your stitches are going to be in the same place on both pieces. Line it up with the needles, and I've never had an issue with things not lining up if I do it that way. So it's really not as difficult or as big of a thing as some people seem to think it might be. So yeah, that's how I do it. Just try it on something, and then see how the stitch looks, because the whole point of this is that you get a slanted stitch on both sides much easier. Like casting works, but this I think does give you a better slant on each side doing it this way, and it's not much more complicated than doing it the normal way, just punching all the way through and casting. So yeah, just try it out and see what you get.